Hey everyone, super excited for this chat today with rock star, with legendary author, content creator, analyst, data scientist, Christopher Penn. Chris, how are you?
I can't complain. It's 2023. Everything seems, we just got through 4th of July. I can still count to 10 on my hands. So we're all good.
It is good. And this is a special Boston area edition. We're both in Boston, although we haven't seen each other in 5, 6, 7 years. So it takes, social media to bring us back together again. For those few folks who don't know who you are, maybe share your journey into becoming a marketing data scientist, keynote speaker, author, et cetera. And we're going to dive into AI, which I'm particularly excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I started in IT. So in the late 90s and in the early 2000s, I was in IT. And then in the 2000s, as many folks know, IT became marketing technology. And I sort of, my career pivoted to go with that. Running send mail on a Linux server became, send the email newsletter and so on and so forth. And then in the early 2010s, I moved out of the financial services company I was in into a PR agency. And one of the things that I got started there with was taking my experience in analytics and starting to move it into data science. And of course, that logically gave way to artificial intelligence and machine learning mostly. So you have things like, how much traffic did the client's website get? Well, can we create a forecast model, using at the time ARIMA and ARMA and all those classical algorithms. And over the last 10 years, AI has evolved shockingly. You first have had huge growth with deep learning, with things like multi-layer perceptrons and stuff, and then really the thing that seems to have launched into the stratosphere. It was a 2017 paper called "Attention is All You Need," which was the release of the transformer architecture, and alongside it the diffuser architecture. So these two AI fundamental foundational technologies came out in 2017. And since then, they have been the underpinnings of everything you're seeing with stuff like ChatGPT and DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, AI created art and writing and poetry and all this stuff. All of that's predicated on those two architectures.
Absolutely. And it's the most exciting time to be a content creator. And you must be, every day must be like a kid in a candy store for you in particular as such a practitioner. Before we jump into that, tell me about your content. You have a weekly newsletter that's highly praised. You have AI for Marketers, which are practical applications for AI in marketing. What else? What did I miss?
There's so much stuff that we create. So I've got 2 podcasts. One is Marketing Over Coffee, which has been on the air since 2007. That's a weekly show. And then the In-Ear Insights podcast, which is the Trust Insights podcast, also weekly. And then there's a Thursday live stream called So What, the Marketing Analytics Insights live show, which is the company live stream. So there's making content all of the time, following a strategy that my friend and former CEO Todd Deffern talked about way back in 2008, the idea of content atomization, where you make a piece of content and you break it up into more content. But I pivoted starting in about 2016, 2017 to being video first, because video is the richest channel that has the most information. And then from video, you can take, snippets and make them Instagram reels or whatever, but you can take the audio and now you've got a podcast. You can take the audio and put it through pieces of transcription software. Now you've got text. And now with generative AI, you can take that text and have it summarized into blog posts, into emails, into social media posts. There's so many different ways to take one piece of video content and just break it up into all these pieces that it really is the best way to generate a lot of content. And then with AI in your pocket, that's a force multiplier that allows you to really dramatically accelerate the total number of pieces of content you can create and then publish wherever your audience wants you to be.
That's a wonderful tactic and best practice. So when did generative AI could have come onto your radar? And how have you managed to consume all of this frenzy of news and updates and analysis and startups and applications that are just coming out of the woodwork? I mean, it's really hard to rationalize what's going on is it's not just about Bard or ChatGPT or OpenAI. There are 1,000 flowers blooming at the moment.
There are 1,000 flowers blooming, and 990 of them will wither and die in 6 months.
Well, thanks for that optimistic note. I'm not kidding.
Well, it's like any startup. There's a tremendous number of companies now that are essentially just a UI on someone else's technology, right? There's not a whole lot of compelling value proposition above and beyond that. Those companies that survive will find some way to add value above and beyond what you can do. But my journey with generative AI started around 2020. When OpenAI released a model called GPT-2 back then. I think it was
GPT-2. Wow, you were early on as a marketeer.
Because it caught my eye that this thing could generate text. And then you had Elithera AI's GPT-J 6B model, the 6 billion parameter model. And so that was sort of the beginning of the open source large language model revolution. And these two things have kind of marched in parallel, and you start seeing more and more growth from these models. You're seeing very large models coming out of big tech companies. Facebook has released its Llama model. Google has Palm 2. Of course, OpenAI has the GPT-4, the 3.5 and 4 family. Anthropic has Claude 2 now. But then you also, in parallel, have this huge ecosystem of open source projects. So Facebook open sourced the Llama model to the community, and that has created thousands of new models, derivatives and things like that. People have created forks. There's Wizard LM. The way I think about the technologies and how to keep them organized, how to tune through a lot of the clutter is twofold. One, I look for use cases, like what do we want to do with this stuff? A real simple example. We're talking, you and I, right now on a live stream. If either one of us says something notable, we'd want to make note of that. So we'd want to maybe to get this transcribed. So then, okay, well, what AI technologies is operating in the transcription space? Whisper, which is OpenAI's open source product, is, by the way, a phenomenal product. It's one that I run on my desk.
I'm writing it down. Another tip from Chris Penn.
It's free. It's open source, and it runs on your laptop. Which is, as long as you've got a good enough laptop, any laptop you can play good video games on, you can use this technology, and then it does the transcription for free. So you have all these services like whatever dollars for how many minutes. Like, now I'm just going to run it locally on my machine, and you can just do crazy stuff with that. So a transcription makes a logical outcome from our conversation. And then summarization makes a logical outcome. So I'd want to look at an AI model that can handle 45 minutes, an hour's worth of conversation, and boil that down and maybe post, but also have the original text. So now I need to think about, okay, well, what kinds of technologies can handle that much text? A good example of that would be Anthropic's Claude 2 model, which got released yesterday. This can handle 100,000 tokens at a time, which, if you're not familiar with AI terminology, that's about 70,000 words.
Wow.
Right? And so I can take our entire conversation from the Whisper transcript, dump that into Claude, and say, okay, now give me a summary, give me the highlights, give me 2 or 3 notable points, and then give me the cleaned up transcript for my blog. And now I've got 40,000 words for a blog post of what we're talking about. So I think about use cases. How do we use this stuff? My partner and CEO, Katie Robert, often says, like, so what? Okay, here's this new cool technology. So what? What does this do for us? By starting with use cases, we can figure, okay, well, here's what I want to do, what technologies can do that. And I have a personal bias towards open source. I have a personal bias towards a technology that I can run on my laptop, because all of us in the tech sphere have had the rug pulled out from us so many times. You become reliant on a service, and you're like, oh, the company's changed. It's tripling its pricing, or it just went out of business. And you're like, okay, well,
this is going out on Twitter, so we've all been through this debacle that has been.
I'm not going to touch that right now. But if I have open source software that I've compiled and ran on my laptop, it's mine for as long as my laptop continues to function, right? And I'm not dependent on a third party. There are times when it's inescapable, like Claude's 100K context model right now. You got to use that if you have a huge amount of text, right? That's the only player in town that can do that for now. There will be more. right? You see the open source models, they're expanding their context windows from 2,000 tokens to 8,000, so about 6,000 words. That's more than enough for a blog post. And now, so as all these technologies march forward, we can now say, okay, well, let's take this one here and bring it in-house now so that we're not dependent on someone else. So that's how I think about this space, is what's being developed, particularly in open source, what's being developed, and then what are the use cases those things map to, and how can we start gluing these things together? I was talking earlier in my Slack group, Analytics for Marketers, and I just wrote a simple shell script that glues YouTube download to FFmpeg to Whisper. So now I can take any YouTube URL, put it in this script, and out pops a transcript, 17 minutes later. Like, okay, now all these great shows on YouTube that maybe I don't have time to watch the entire 2.5-hour show, right? I can have this tool now spit out, here's the 10 bullet points. And maybe it spits out enough bullet points. I go, you know what? Maybe I don't need to watch this one. Maybe I can skip this episode.
Wow, that's so fun. So, so many opportunities for folks like ourselves who are pretty sophisticated users of technology and techies at heart. But, generative AI is also creating a lot of consternation, a lot of fear and uncertainty for marketeers, professionals, how it will disrupt their career, displace them, displace their job, their day-to-day. What's your advice to those folks who are really worried?
Here's the uncomfortable truth. AI will not take your job. AI is not going to take your job. A person who is skilled with AI will take the jobs of people who are not skilled with AI. If you are a writer and you are skilled with large language models, you can do the job of 10 writers who are not, right? And so the challenge for a lot of professionals is, okay, well, how do I become skilled at tools based on diffuser models or tools based on transformer models, the two foundational technologies, so that A, I'm not immediately replaced, and B, I am the one that a company will pick when they say, okay, well, we need to downsize, but who here is the most productive? Hey, that's weird. Evan cranks out 7 times as much content as all of his other peers. Maybe we'll keep Evan and we'll get rid of these other folks, right? You want to be that person who gets the nod, says, okay, you are clearly way more productive than others. What's your secret? Of course, your secret is going to be the intelligent integration of AI tools into your workflow. You've got to become that person. On May 2nd, the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, went on strike at noon time. And this was posted on Twitter. I thought it was quite alarming. 14 minutes later, a writer who works in the AI space said, I just got my first inquiry from a studio saying, hey, we need a writer with AI skills to help us write some dialogue. It's like, okay, so it took 14 minutes for these streaming studios to say, you know what, those human writers, let's start pushing them to the side. This is our opportunity to start pushing them to the side. Let's start bringing in people who are skilled with the machinery to replace them. And because AI is such a force multiplier, it's not going to be a 1-to-1. One person who's skilled with AI will replace the job of one person who's not. It's 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 5, 1 to 10. And so there will be many more people who will not have employment if they are unskilled with AI, because other people who are capable of doing their work.
Yeah, well, it's good to get a picture of the micro and the macro, and these macro trends really don't always impact you in the individual or micro level. Talk about speaking. You're a renowned keynote speaker. First of all, our keynote's back, after this pandemic is winding down. And is keynote speaking one of the few areas that won't be impacted by generative AI, or do you have to adapt and modify or leverage that in your speaking work?
Speaking and events are definitely back. They've really been back since about midsummer last year.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I made my first trip after lockdown last summer to Montenegro, of all places, which was absolutely gorgeous. Highly recommended. In terms of the way generative AI is impacting everything else, even in speaking, yes, a machine's just not going to get up on stage and read out loud in your voice, right? That's not going to be a particularly satisfactory experience for anyone. Any place where there's an interface with other human beings, machines don't scale particularly well to that, because humans tend to like other humans. This is one of the reasons why you and I are talking on this live stream, and not you talking to an AI model of my voice.
I would do that happily too, though. I want a Chris bot to chat with. But yes, please continue.
I mean, there are influencers who are doing that, who have synthetic language models now that you can have conversations with. I saw Twitch streamer Adriana Chechik just rolled out one that's like $10 for $10. I think like $10 a month or something, to talk with an AI, a trained language model of her, so her fans can interact with a simulacrum of her that has some knowledge of the types of things that she would say, and she doesn't have to do that. But in general, people still prefer to do business with other people. So having someone on stage, having someone that you can hang out with and afterwards and have coffee with, or ask your burning questions to, there's still a lot of value in that machines are not going to replace as readily. But one other thing I think is really important to think about AI is this: it's going to create weird bottlenecks in supply chains, in content supply chains. So let me give you an example. You have a blog, you write a blog post, you push, you edit it, you publish it, and you promote it, right? That's pretty standard. Suppose you put a piece of AI in the writing phase, right? So you still have to edit, you still have to post it, you still have to promote it. That AI can now help you scale from writing a blog post a day to 1,000 blog posts a day. Now you've got a bottleneck, because are you going to edit 1,000 posts a day? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. And even if you get a model to do that, are you then going to have, how are you going to post it? How are you going to distribute it? How are you going to promote it? And so it's going to create distortions along the way that will necessitate extra people in the spots where the machines don't work as well. We saw this. I'll give you a real old example. Go back to 1764. There was, prior to that date, yeah, you're like, okay. Prior to that date, people, mostly women, operated these tools called spinning wheels that would take fibers and spin them into thread. In 1764, the spinning jenny was invented, which was essentially a 10-way version of a spinning wheel. So one person could operate this thing now, create 10 times the amount of fiber at the same time. And this had drastic impacts on the rest of the supply chain, because now you have mountains of thread. You're like, okay, now we need to weave it into textiles, weave it into cloth and stuff. And so created a block in their supply chain. The same thing's going to happen with AI. We have to think about, how are we going to deal with bulges in certain parts of the supply chain, and how are we going to resolve that? How many extra people will you need to hire as editors to deal with the fact that you now have machines that can crank out 10,000 pieces of content a day?
Wow. So yeah, breaking new ground here. Supply chain and marketing are not two things that typically get taught in the same sentence. Fascinating. Talking about, you do a lot of educating people like me, or your clients and beyond. But what would you give as advice to young people who are looking at marketing and wondering how this career is going to be affected by Gen AI, and just generally, how do they get ahead of this wave? Beyond, obviously consuming all of your content and others, what advice would you have for them in their 20s, perhaps?
So there's a couple of things that machines really don't do well and won't do well for a while. One of which is they are still not very good cross-disciplinary thinkers. Even with the largest language models, they still don't exhibit truly emergent cross-disciplinary thinking. So it's very difficult for them to come up with things that humans do through our intentionally flawed memory mechanisms, right? When you're trying to think of what to create, creating is inherently tied to memory, and our memories are flawed in that we only tend to remember things that are high emotional valence, right? I don't remember what I had for lunch 2 weeks ago on Thursday. It was not something that made a huge emotional impact on me. Do I remember what I had for dinner at my wedding? Sure do, because it was a very emotionally key thing. So our memories are tied to emotion. Machines don't have that. Machines have essentially perfect memory, but part of perfect memory means that no one memory is more important than other memories. And so when it creates, it is not creating in the same way that humans do. It is our dependence on emotion that creates memory loss, and that memory loss is what allows true creativity to kind of fill in the gap. Machines will get there. there's early work on doing this, but it's still not quite the same. So if you are a young professional, or you're in school right now, you need to be looking at having as many cross-disciplinary experiences as possible. Like, take that 19th century French literature class, take that, intro to Islam class, take all these things that will give you a better and more nuanced understanding of humanity, because humanity is what the machines are calibrating towards. And it's very difficult for them to do that because we are such weird creatures. The second thing is this is an acknowledgement. Everyone has to get skilled up on the use of these AI tools. You have to know it, because here's the part that folks don't want to talk about. The jobs that are going to be affected the most are the entry-level jobs, right? If you have someone whose job is just writing press releases, say at a PR agency, well, guess what? The machines can do that almost entirely now. So we don't need humans to do that anymore. We do need humans to edit it, to QA it, to like, hey, you made up a quote from a CEO doesn't exist. This is probably not something we should do here. But there will be far fewer jobs available at the entry level because machines will be doing so many more of them. So if you're one of those people who are skilled with AI and your peers are not, you have an advantage. You will be one of the people who, a hiring manager will say, well, why should I hire you versus having a machine do it? And you could say, because I am good at working the machines and I can dramatically increase your productivity and your results. Whereas all the other people who are competing for the same job, they can't do that. And this is every field. What happened this past week was just absolutely stunning. OpenAI opened up Code Interpreter, which is part of the GPT-4 system in the paid version of ChatGPT. Code Interpreter is the dumbest name for the most brilliant product ever. It is a junior data scientist, is what it really is. You can take, for example, export say your personal finance. Maybe you export your bank account data, right, in a CSV file, and you insert it into Code Interpreter. Be sure to turn off logging so that you're not handing OpenAI your financial data. But then you say, run a financial analysis on this data and tell me, where am I wasting my money every month? And it will go through and it will write code, Python code, to do that, and then show you the analysis it does, right? So if you are a person who is skilled with these tools, you can fill a ton of different entry-level roles. Think about, bookkeeping. You, with the help of Code Interpreter, could be a good novice, no years experience bookkeeper in the workforce with this tool, even though you never went to school for it, because the machine is good enough at that junior level task. So everyone needs to understand this stuff, but people who are junior in their careers most, they need to understand it the most of all, because there will be far fewer positions available.
Great point. I hope folks are listening and taking note. You've given us so much wisdom and insight, but any anecdotal stories or case studies of maybe your clients or otherwise who've been using generative AI really effectively in their marketing campaigns or in content? I mean, we're all using it to some degree, but where is it having the most impact, would you say?
The most impact it's having right now is in marketing operations, right? It is in being able to help people do their jobs faster. Everything from building schedules and calendars, replying to emails, creating commodity content. Like, here's our status update. One of the places we use it every reporting period with one of our clients is we take in hundreds and hundreds of pieces of feedback from one of our clients' website survey systems, simple satisfaction surveys, and we say, okay, summarize this content into the top 5 categories and the top five positive and top 5 negative categories of feedback for the customer's website. And so instead of having to read literally 22,000 pieces of feedback every month for this client, they can look at the top 5 issues, positive and negative, and the percentages, and the machine is summarizing all the stuff so well and so easily that it allows them to make decisions very, very quickly. So as much as people are like, oh yeah, generate infinite amounts of content, like, yes, you can, but that's kind of like taking a Porsche 911 to the grocery store. Like, yeah, it does the job, but it's kind of overkill. But in operations, in streamlining and giving you access to stuff is where it really shines. The other place that it shines and is so underused is in professional development. People don't think of these tools as professional development and training tools, and they are exactly that. I'll give you an example. In large language models, there's these two concepts called parameters and weights, the number of parameters that a model has and the model weights. And if you read the technical explanations about it, it's like, okay, this is, here's how these things are calculated and here's the mathematics. And for a lot of people, that explanation just goes and just slides right off their brain, right? Go into a tool like Chat GPT, for example, and say, explain within the context of large language models, parameters and weights in terms of pizza. And it will say, if a large language model is a pizza, the parameters, the variety of toppings, and the weights are how many of each topping there is. You're like, oh, I get it now. Now I can speak intelligently about this. If you've ever been...
Brilliant. No, and I love the explain it like I'm a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. That's also a wonderful technique.
It is, but explain it in something that you're passionate about, because your brain was like, oh, you're a musician. Okay, explain this to me in terms of guitar tabs. Okay. If you've ever been in a meeting or at a conference or any place where you don't want to ask a question out loud because, like, oh God, everyone's going to think I'm dumb, or my team should think I should know this already. You just pull up your phone, you type the question into Chat GPT and say, explain this to me. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, now I know what you're talking about and I can participate in this meeting again. It is such an underrated tool for helping people get up to speed very quickly.
Oh, such great advice. Well, as we wrap up here, let's take a look a bit longer out, maybe 5 years. Give us maybe an upside and a downside scenario, best case, worst case, on how we might be living in 5 years with generative AI in our daily lives. What do you think? A couple predictions.
I can't even tell you 5 months, right? If you think about it, Chat GPT was released in November of last year. It has not even been a full year, and this circus train has just gone, off the rails and into the sky. We've got models popping up everywhere. We've got thousands of new companies. We have all sorts of crazy emergent properties happening in the largest models. I have no clue. What I can say is this: the current architectures will not permit true consciousness, right? It will not permit machines to be self-aware. This is computationally not possible with today's architectures. The system that will allow that is quantum computing, because quantum computing is essentially, the way they work is massively parallel, like our brains, right? Like the gray matter in here. Our brains are essentially really slow but extremely complex parallel processors. Quantum computing allows that, but at a much faster pace, assuming we can stabilize them. Right now, they're at about 1,000 qubits or so, which is like 1,000 brain cells, and you have like billions, if not trillions, of brain cells in your head that create that interlinking complexity creates emergent properties like consciousness. Once quantum computing finally gets up to speed and can start tackling things like language models, then you have the conditions for consciousness. In terms of what's likely to happen, we can count on 2 sets of properties that are going to be consistent, right? Everybody wants better, faster, and cheaper. So if you're wondering about the motivations of any company and its use of AI, it's going to want those things, right? And people are generally greedy, stupid, and horny. So we can expect that any product that serves those things, those human impulses, is going to do well. Then people will use AI for those applications, whether you want them to or not. There will be substantial job losses, but there will also be substantial job creations as people find services and places and things where machines don't work well. There's a new service, for example, in Japan, someone whose job it is to help you quit working at a company because of complex personal relationships. Like, that's a service? But it clearly is. The big thing that in a 5 to 10 year time span that is a much greater, more pressing problem that people need to be planning for now, in terms of supply chain and business continuity, is climate change. Climate change is happening so fast. We're in what is essentially an accelerating feedback loop. As things get warmer, things that create conditions for increasing warmth get worse. There's a whole bunch of methane trapped in the permafrost around the Arctic Circle, and methane deposits essentially in the ocean. As the planet warms up, this gets released, which creates warming even faster. And there's not a whole lot, to stop that particular train. As a result, things like these wildfires that we've been having. Wildfires are going to be getting worse. They'll be around longer. They'll be much bigger. And so even something as simple as, all those masks that we bought for the pandemic, we're going to want to have them on hand, because that's how you block at least the particulates from wildfires. But all the supply chain stuff we've been seeing rippling since the pandemic was going to continue. It's going to get worse. So companies need to be thinking about, from a business continuity perspective, A, how can I build redundancy and safety in my supply chain? And B, how can I use technology to communicate faster with my stakeholders, my customers and things, so that they are informed faster and I can keep customers happier for longer, knowing that it's going to be more and more challenging to provide physical goods and services.
Oh, such a great point. I was just talking to a big telecom customer of mine this morning who is using drones and third-party fire detection apps to actually detect fires before they spread, and to deploy drones automagically to put them out. I mean, so the use of AI and drones and 5G and IoT and all this tech is coming together for good. Well, it's been such a delight chatting with you. What are you up to the rest of the summer, personally, professionally? Any travel ahead?
Oh, tons of travel. So in a couple of weeks,
Okay.
I'll be in Cleveland for the Marketing AI conference. I'll be keynoting that, talking about large language models. And then in September, I've got 1 week where there's 4 different events that week. So there's Content Jam, Content Marketing World, Marketing Analytics and Data Science Conference, and a private event. And then I've been doing a lot of private talks at companies, just trying to help these companies get their employees up to speed on generative AI as quickly as possible. So that's been sort of the bulk of the speaking stuff is, hour-long talks or 6-hour workshops internally at companies to say, like, hey, let's get your team up to speed. Let's show you this stuff, but in a version of a talk that's customized for your industry, so you can see how you would apply this today. Like your telecom company client, for example, you would show a ton of examples. Like, here's how you would use voice of the customer data from your call center to guide your marketing strategy, like how you would create marketing copy from the voice of the customer, because it resonates better when customers see language that they would be using themselves rather than what a marketer came up with, which may or may not even be true.
Yeah, wonderful advice. Thank you so much for spending time with us. And thank you, the audience here, for watching. Reach out to Chris at CS Penn on Twitter and beyond. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.